I call to order the school board workshop. Ms. Tanner, please call the roll.
Basine?
Here.
Buffalo?
Here.
Martin?
Present.
Paulson?
Present.
Thomas?
Here.
Calagero.
Here. There's an announcement I'd like to make prior to the start of the agenda. As authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712B of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act, within 15 days from today, the school board will hold a closed session meeting for the sole purpose of interviewing candidates for the position of superintendents of Norfolk Public Schools. All right, our first agenda item, 3.01, update on VGOE accountability system.
I have a point of order. Our non-negotiable number 2 requires that we will not operate without an annual self-evaluation to assess the strengths and areas, et cetera, et cetera. The one that we discussed is not an annual, the one of July 9th, 2024. I fact-checked it. Our policy, AFA, requires that the evaluation include a professional development program, and the one that is on file for July 9th, 2024 does not have that. So it is not an annual evaluation. And the progress monitoring calendar has it on there as a quarterly. So we do not have a 2024 self-evaluation. The non-negotiable says we will not operate without one. So what do we do?
I assume that you were referring to 2025 and not 2024.
2024.
Last July.
That would have been last
July 9th, 2024. Talked about this before. It was brought up that it was done, but not an annual, a quarterly was. Did none in 2024.
Well, if I could speak to that,
Yes,
Madam
please.
Chair. So I believe when we were doing coaching, the monitoring calendar that we had a couple iterations ago had a quarterly, because that was our aim, was to do a quarterly. We're required by law to do one annually, but not this board, but previous boards had aimed to do one quarterly, because we wanted to see how we were doing against the student outcomes focused governance framework. And so that required, more frequent check-ins with the board to see how we were doing. So we did at one point in a previous version of the monitoring calendar have a quarterly one. But that is not what our most recently adopted monitoring calendar reflects. So I would maybe look into the facts that Mr. Paulson is bringing forward so that we can review and forward to for further discussion at a point when we all have the same information.
Comment? She makes reference to our the current policy, which we did adopt. We did not adopt, but we did discuss not having the quarterly ones on the monitoring counter, quarterly self-evaluations. But we have not adopted a policy to do that. But I'm talking about 2024. And so her policy that she's referencing is current. This is prior to.
I think we all need more information on this topic. And
Without looking at what Mr. Paulson's looking at.
You want to look at it?
not right now, but I want to be able to dig into it and
Yeah,
understand.
if you could maybe share it and we can have this discussion that's my individual viewpoint. Leave it up to other colleagues to weigh in on it.
Like to get to the
the matter of the accountability and accreditation update that our students and see how our students, we can look into that, get the same information, but right now, this is priority. We need to know where our kids are, what our kids know and what they don't know, and this agenda's been out here for a whole week. Need to move to the business of the school board today.
I mean, I do believe that.
Where
I do agree that we
accountability
need to-
is my issue, and we're
Right.
not taking accountability.
I do think that we should be evaluating ourselves much more frequently. We just have gotten off track somewhere, and I am committed to doing my part to get back on track, so. Yeah.
And for what it's worth, the agenda was not posted a week ago. It was posted sometime Monday. The agenda has not been out there for a week.
Well, it's been out there for the board because it's been in the draft, so it's been there.
No, it was
It's been
not
under
in the
draft.
draft.
It's been under
But
draft.
on the 5th,
It's
I
been
mean,
under
correction, the
draft.
4th, it was not in there before. I have a screenshot.
Well,
Yesterday was.
It's all of our agendas that we have before they're posted live to the
That's
public
correct.
are under draft.
But it
That's how
was
we
posted
know
on-
what's coming
We
forward.
don't know.
So,
It was
I mean,
posted
they've
on the
been- they've been
morning
there.
of the 4th.
Because that's,
Tanner? Ms. Tanner, since we, when was the materials posted to board docs?
Been in draft ever since a month or so ago because we had those agendas up. We have agenda planning, we have up through December in the drafts for the school board to view.
But we're taking no action on this.
Well, I think we need to get that information shared. Those of us who were not on the school board in 2024 need some historical background to understand what truly happened. And, can't change the past, but we can make sure that in the future, we are crossing our Ts and dotting our Is correctly. Again, more information. Further discussion from the board? Let's move on to agenda item 3.01.
Madam Chair, as Ms. McGarrity's coming up, I just want to remind the board and the public that the VDOE has sequestered the student data still. They have, my understanding is they've contracted out with a third party to review all the data and make sure it's in line with the new accountability system. As you're aware, we shared pass rates with you in July, and we've given you updated pass rates. Ms. McGarity is going to go through the intricacies now of the new accountability system as an update to all board members. And once the data is released, we are prepared to present the data on our student performance. Know that our schools and our principals do have their data. They've been reviewing it. They've been using it. But we're not able to share that publicly at this time. So Ms. McGarry's here to, this is a very confusing system. It's taken 6 months for me to really have a good grasp and understanding of it as we go. So she's going to try to do that in 30 minutes. So be prepared with questions. Ms. McGarry is definitely our resident expert. And she will walk you through this system so that you have a deep understanding so that when the data is released, you have a thorough understanding of where we stand as a division. Thank you. Ms. McGarry?
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair DeCalagero, Vice Chair Thomas, board members, and Dr. Pohl. So this afternoon, we're going to go through an overview of this. The accountability system that is called the School Performance and Support Framework, and for short, we call it the SPSF. Some background information, VDOE has reported the following principles for moving to this new accountability system. 1, wanting high expectations for every student. 2, transparency and access to actionable information. Prioritize getting every student to proficiency. 4, to build trust between schools, parents, and students through transparent and concrete reporting, and to include stakeholder input. Regarding the data availability from last school year, as Dr. Pohl was just talking about, to be transparent, as of today, the data for the SPSF are still embargoed. Preview data for the SPSF was received by divisions at the end of September. However, myself and team member Greg Williams have worked diligently to review and have sent an estimated 15 to 20 corrections to VDOE regarding our data. This is the same thing that is happening across the state, and it's not due to anything that the divisions have done or that we have any control over, unfortunately. Just recently, though, as Dr. Pohl also mentioned, due to all the corrections and concerns from the divisions and the idea of data integrity, VDOE has hired a third-party vendor to validate the data as well as the system in itself. Is the system doing what they wanted it to do? Just as an FYI, that we do still have data corrections out to VDOE that have not been corrected as of today. We know schools still have to move forward and make critical decisions for instructional programming for students. And in previous years, the accountability and accreditation really was a major force in that process. However, due to the unclear timelines of receiving data from VDOE, we ensured data included in the companion documents that we provide to schools in August included data that we were confident to calculate internally or was coming much sooner, so that is really kind of the foundational items that would impact this with whatever it came out with, right? So that's something the schools have had in their hands that we've been working with, and also for monitoring and those kinds of pieces. As we go through, I will try and give some examples of things that we've given. And again, the annual pass rates really are a big one that we've been kind of sitting on to use. And finally, before we begin the presentation, this is focused around the rules implemented around last year's data. However, there are changes that have already happened for this year's data, and others to be proposed that'll take effect. And at the end of the presentations, I'll go through a few of those changes that have happened or are being proposed and what their impact is going to be. All right. So here we go. The Virginia Board of Education during the 24-25 school year made the determination to shift from our previous accreditation system to an explicit input-output system. And this is what they're using to monitor schools and divisions. The inputs are on the left, and these are the structures and systems that are required to be in place in all schools and divisions in Virginia. The outputs on the right are the student outcomes on assessments and other required tasks. The reason we talk about this is because I'm going to look at the next piece that we have our accreditation, that's inputs. This is a graphic. We will talk about a few of these details, but just to kind of show, we used to have accreditation, so common language here. Accreditation used to be based on student outcomes in an implied system. Now that they've gone to this explicit system of inputs, outputs, we have accreditation as inputs, and we have accountability that are outputs. The accreditation are those things, again, that their examples are, do we have a policy in place for promotion retention? Kind of yes, no questions. So with the accreditation process and ratings with these inputs, as of July 31st, 2025, the Board of Education finalized the new process for accreditation, requiring schools and divisions to submit responses to a more than 130 question survey within a month regarding all accreditation topics, and the topics are all listed to the right. There's multiple bullets under each we had to respond to. Some examples of topics include verification of a promotion retention policy for the division, if we're teaching the Virginia Standards of Learning to our students, and do we notify parents in a timely manner about an array of items. This was all completed on time by Norfolk Public Schools via the required survey form. Each school will be provided an accreditation rating. When we do get data back, we have not seen, this has not even been provided for review, because as of today, VDOE has not provided what the specific criteria are for the accreditation ratings based on our responses to that survey. We have this vague definition, if we would call it that, to know what it is. We don't know. We know what we answered, but we don't know what they're going to take to say you are accredited or accreditation with conditions. So moving on to the outputs, talking about the school performance and student framework, where are our kids, what do they know, what do we need to do, those kinds of things. This is a quick review of the SPSF, which is the output portion. The school performance and support framework is a weighted index where each school has 3 areas in which outcome data is calculated and weighted based on the Virginia Board of Education's priorities. Elementary, middle, and combined schools will all be measured on mastery, growth, and readiness, and altogether, they're going to equal 100 points with their framework. High schools will be measured on mastery, graduation, and readiness. All areas have different percentages listed, which I like to look at as more of total points versus percentages. It just makes it make more sense in the sentence as you speak it. For example, in elementary schools, mastery holds 65% of the SPSF weight, but we can also call it that mastery. You can get up to 65 points in mastery. Here, the last slide was an image of kind of the overall component, so the 3 components, but each component inside of it has a set of indicators. All of the indicators have, the images up here are of each school level, the individual indicators and their weight within each component. Staying with the elementary example, we know the mastery component is worth 65 points. Within that component, the reading SOL test outcomes are worth 22.5 points. The math SOL outcomes are 22.5. SOL for science is 10 points, and then EL progress is 10 points. Same pattern applies to every component, every indicator, and move for all of the different levels. The points earned in each indicator are added up for total points for a school on the SPSF, and the total points are then interpreted to be performance categories. So this next slide are the performance categories that can be assigned to a school for the accountability system. So schools from their total points, schools with below 65 points are given, if we're looking from the right to the left, given the category of needs intensive support, they would have 65 to 79 points. They would be labeled as performing off track. 80 to 89 on track. 90 and above, they would be a distinguished school. So a school that needs intensive supports is a school that requires more support from VDOE and has more regulations and things that they have to complete to improve student outcomes. And a distinguished school is one that has surpassed the expectations of VDOE. Another layer to this whole process of performance categories is the federal identification of schools. Schools are federally identified based on their performance compared to the lowest 5% of Title I schools in Virginia. If a school is labeled as TSI or ATSI, which would be targeted support and intervention or assisted targeted support and interventions, then their performance category will actually be dropped. And so that means if a school's performing on track because they have 89 points, but they are labeled TSI, they would be dropped down to off track. So we really are focusing about where are we performing if they are federally identified. CSI schools, though, will not be dropped unless they are a distinguished category. So if a CSI school is performing as on track, they will stay as on track. Lots of faces that I feel like I make as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yes. So, alrighty. So with that, mastery index. So we're going to go through, talk about real quick kind of what the points are, but we're going to get into detailed information on how the points are earned by the schools. It is somewhat in the weeds, but otherwise it doesn't really make sense if we don't talk about that. So we're going to kind of get weedy for a second. We'll also look at a review slide. We'll remind ourselves how the total points can be earned, what does it look like for an individual student, and then how does that level up for a school. So first we're going through mastery. The first piece we'll look at are reading, math, and science mastery index. So mastery for reading, math, and science, like I just said, is an index. What that means is that all SOL test outcomes are given a point value based on their performance level. In the area of reading and math for grades 3 through 8, those are going to be what's on the left side of the screen. All other assessments are going to be on the right. So if a student takes a test and earns a pass advanced score, they're given 1.25 points. If they're pass proficient score, they get 1 point, fail basic, 0.75, fail below basic, 0.25, and if they're a non-participant, they don't get any points, but they're calculated in. High school tests All science tests, history tests, and VAP tests have one less performance level, and it's on the right. That's that list on the right. And basically, there's not the fail below basic, it's just you're failed, and then non-participants. Okay, so let's do an example real quick. So if we're a school, my school has 5 kids in it, so, should be able to work through this, right? This is kind of the weedy part, and again, don't feel like you need to understand the full calculation, but it does just kind of make sense how we get from point A to point B. The same process is used across every indicator, across the entire framework, to kind of add up towards that 100 points. So wanted to kind of go through once. So if we're looking at this from the SOL perspective, reading or math, science works the same way, but if a student is a fail below basic score, then they're awarded 0.25 points. If they're past proficient, they're awarded 1 point. Fail basic, my third kiddo, 0.75, pass advanced, 1.25, and a non-participant is 0 points. So I'm going to add all those points up, and I'm going to say, okay, now I have 3.25 points, but that's not my final points because the weight has to be applied. So this is where that weight comes in. So wherever, again, one of their principles was transparency. So we have to take that and transfer it over by each of the indicator weights for whatever that piece is. So depending on where, and in mastery, for example, it is 65% for elementary, but it is only 50% of the weight for high school. So the priorities are kind of moved around with the different levels. So I'm going to take my points and I'm going to figure out my points from the amount of kids we have, which is my 5, what is my rate? So I've got 65%. The other way it used to be, did the kid pass, did the kid fail? I have 5 kids, this many, 1 passed, here's what my rate is. This rate now is about the points, and there are kids who can earn more than 1 point, and there are kids who are going to earn points even though they didn't pass. So we keep that in mind when we're kind of talking through the system and using the data. So we take that rate, and then we have to multiply it by our weight, is where we get our points. To say, for reading, if we're going to use a reading elementary example, the total points are 14.625 for this one content area in mastery. So we're going to carry that total weight, total weighted points here forward into our example. So this example is going to keep showing up. So with this, I've said, okay, for reading, my 5 kids, these are the amount of points out of 22.5 points that they could earn. You'll notice we don't really ever look at things this many decimal points out. To be very clear, this is one of the things we've really pushed back from the superintendent level down to our level. There is no rounding whatsoever in this system at all. They are using what they're calling full precision calculations, so they are even going out to the 7th decimal point to even kind of add things in. So it again, even just looks different, and it has a little bit of a different twist, and so we'll kind of keep bringing that theme up of no rounding. Seems like it's not a big deal, but in our old system, if it was points, we would say this was 15 points because it would round up, right? No rounding at all for this system. So with here, I've kind of quickly, I've pulled in point values. If we did the exact same thing for math SOL tests and then for science SOL tests, right? So in our example, so far we've built reading, math, and science in the mastery index. So this is an example of a place where we had a sneaky suspicion that timelines, they were shifting a lot, right? We're not going to get things, not get things. And those companion documents we talked about. The underlying, this is an example of a place we made sure schools had data in hand August at the latest. In their companion documents where we would say, what were the annual pass rates, not just to say what was the pass-fail, but what was the different performance levels, and gave it back to them historically. So they were able to have multiple years where we backtrack to say, has your percentage of pass-advanced students increased, decreased, stayed the same, whatever that might be? Because we knew we don't have this, we can't give them this. We can't be confident that our calculation of it is right, but we made sure schools always had things in place that were really kind of the root of the data and that student performance. All right, so we're going to move on to the EL piece of it. So with Mastery Index, there's one more indicator, which is the EL progress. This is it's the access, so basically what the EL progress is it is based on our EL students' progress on the Access for L's assessment. And they take that assessment annually, and it is a progress comparison from the prior year's Access for L's assessment to that data year's assessment. And they're measured against this progress chart. So using the progress chart, students are counted in only if they have an assessment from the year before. They're only counted in, so with that, that was in Virginia also. Because an Access for L's test can be taken in Idaho, I think New Jersey has it. There's like a large consortium of states that give this. We can't use those. We have to use just if it's in Virginia. There are 4 domains. Really, the purpose of the Access for L's test measures the ability for an EL student and how well they're moving through. They're able to navigate the English instructional and social, really the school English, social, and instructional language. So it's not just, am I better at English? It is really, am I able to navigate that language better under kind of the academic guise of school, is what that looks like. There's 4 domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And all of that goes in, that's assessed for the EL students. And then they compare it here. So with this, if they show growth, you get a point. If you don't show growth, you don't get a point. So this one's, at least we're not leveled all over the place, but we got to figure out on the chart. This is another place. We did not have the data from the state about how our students were doing, but what we did have was we had Title III data, and we were able to take that and configure it to show, here's what we know about your students that you had last year, but here's also what we know about your students that are with you now. And we did this again, this was something back in August, to say, here's where they need to go, and that kind of thing. So it's another place we've been able to pull data from a place that is released and that we were able to configure to at least give them something to work off that's actionable versus waiting till we don't know when at this point. All right, so Mastery Index, I've put in the 5 points. So out of 10 points, this school has earned their 5 points for EL progress. So basically 50% of the kids, EL kids, showed progress from year to year. And so with that, I will mention one more thing to mention here. And I think you're kind of getting the idea of feels like those aren't important, but the nuances about this system make a huge difference if you, with what's really going on. So with this, for EL progress, if a school does not have 15 or more students, EL progress indicator does not activate. The 10 points redistribute over to another area to growth. We have schools, if they have low EL enrollment, which we do have some, then their growth is going to be worth more than a school that has EL students. High school, we don't have any that are below, but there's a whole other process for high school that we're not going to worry about because we are well over our 15, and we're just going to keep moving forward with that piece of it. All right, so with that said, basically, we add all of our points up. So we've got our 4 different indicators that are now filled out for mastery, and we have our total mastery points when we add all those together to have 48.875 points in mastery. This being an elementary example, this school received 48.875 points out of 65 that they could have possibly had. Okay, so let's move on to growth. So again, same thing here. So with that, the weights are here, different weights based on elementary and combined versus middle school. So again, that's that priority, it's more important. The state's looking at it as growth is more important for an elementary grade level student than a middle school grade level student, and they kind of just met in the middle for the combined schools. So with growth, this piece, there is a value added for each student depending on spring to spring SOL rates. It is grades 4 through 8 only. Third grade's not included because students have to have 2 SOL tests in their test history to be calculated in for growth. It is a value-added measure, so it doesn't have to be two reading for reading, two math for math. Can be reading and math. It could be science and history, and they'd be able to determine what an expected growth for a student would be for reading and math. This was all done through Vivos, which was a company with SAS in prior years, and it was the expected growth measure. So the big piece of that is that we did not have targets for students throughout the year. We didn't know what the growth was that was expected of them, because it is also the value-added piece is it is a state comparison. So they're looking at, in the state, how did our students grow who have similar test histories to each other? And it's only the test history piece is the part that they look at, not any kind of other demographic data or anything, but saying, okay, this is how kids grew across the state. But what happens is we don't get the data, and we didn't get it till October, like a little bit early, maybe mid-October, we got the growth data to even know what the kids' expected growth was for last year. So that is, and that's a piece, again, throughout the year we've provided data of, we are taking the state growth assessments, how are kids moving through this. But if students met the expected growth, they got a point. If they surpassed it, they got 1.25. If they narrowly missed it, it's 0.5. Other than that, it's no growth. So if you pull that example forward, here I've provided points for reading and math. It's our same elementary example. And with that piece, I add those up. I get now for reading and math, I have 21.05 points out of my 25 points. Remember, if we had to redistribute points, it would be out of 35 points, not 25, if we had to redistribute because there was not enough EL students. So we have to be careful when we get all of our data, looking at this, saying, okay, you lost more than this school, but did they have a different end game kind of thing? So, all right, so then moving into readiness, I'm kind of powering through as well. So now for readiness. So we have readiness across all 4 levels here, same thing. Everybody has chronic absenteeism, but there are different values and different indicators at each level. The general idea or the purpose of readiness is that students are ready for their next level. So elementary school age kids are ready for middle school. Middle school's ready for high school. High school's ready for post-secondary life. So with that, everybody has chronic absenteeism here, and really, this is the one place that we can kind of take a breath. It has not changed. The way they get at it, the way you put it together with all the points, yes, but the way we're not having to refigure out how they're considering kids chronically absent or not. It is still 10% of their days. If they're, if they're chronically absent because they've missed 10% or more, they get 0 points. I call them chronically present, which is what we want more of. They get a point for being chronically present, kind of thing. So pulling that forward for elementary, then we have the 9.920 points out of their 10 for that. And we add all 3 of those together, which is going to give us 79.845 points. So I've added my total mastery, total growth, total readiness. So that's how we get a total points. However, because there is no rounding and 80 points is on track, this school is off track. This hurts a lot. So we fight for every point, for sure. That's why we sent back so many corrections and things. We're not going to we're not leaving points on the table.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I'm like, we're acting like it's, judge and jury were like, we're not leaving points on the table, and we got to figure this out and that kind of thing. So, and it's especially that, because they're, 0.2 points.
I'm going to pause for a second.
I can pause, I can keep going, I can do whatever you want.
I don't want to interrupt the flow.
I just have, the rest of it is just the additional middle school and high school pieces real quick.
Okay.
So you do whatever you feel is.
Got like 6 slides left.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll wait. Yeah.
All right. Yes, I know. One of the readiness, one additional readiness piece from chronic absenteeism for middle schools and our combined schools for the middle school age kids is advanced math coursework. Really what this comes down to is that students who VDOE has determined are ready for advanced math coursework should be on that trail. And then if they are taking the EOC Algebra 1 or Geometry, if they pass the test, this one's truly a pass-fail. If they pass the test, they're given a point. If they don't, then they're 0 points. One of the readiness pieces is that if a student took the grade 7 math test the prior year and earned a pass advanced score, then they're required to be placed into Algebra 1, which we worked with our counselors and all those kinds of things and really digging in to make sure we didn't have anybody. And actually, we were actually doing that already. So any kid we found that was in that situation, they actually in their 8th grade year were in Algebra 1. So we were kind of already in that process. So here, this is, all the numbers are different pretty much because it is now a middle school example. So the weights, all those things have shifted. Here's that middle school example, 73.395 points total. They're also an off-track school. An additional, the readiness component for high school is the 6-year FGI. I'm not going to talk too much about this because we will talk about it more when we get to the next piece of graduation. But basically here what's happening is that students are given a point if they are a student who's graduated with a standard or advanced diploma or an applied studies diploma by year 6. So for example, this past year, they are looking at cohort 2023 to be able to say, all right, what do we have going on? Re-looking at everybody that already had graduated, and then do we have any additional kiddos that have graduated or have the applied studies diploma? GEDs and, dropouts we get are 0 points, but even if they earned a GED, it is nothing. It is considered the same as a dropout.
As it is now, right?
Well,
Hold
that thought for a second. And the only reason I say that is because I do have that coming up on the next, address that directly. So the next piece, so we've got points pulled forward. Then we have the 3E framework. This is a huge piece. It's similar to CCCRI that we used to talk about, but it is not exactly the same. So it is an and system. So this is really that high school piece of looking at post-secondary life for them. It is the sole huge weighted item for a high school. So there are, and kids can do, because it is an and system, a kid can get points in enrollment and employment and enlistment. And we did have, when we were kind of looking through, we've got kids who are taking all kinds of things. So, the likelihood is that that might show up for a few kiddos, but not every kid, right? So with this piece, here are the different activities under each header that will equal a point value. So again, a kid could be a point in enrollment, a point in employment, and then 0.5 points in enlistment, and they would be a 2.5, and that kind of thing. So with that and all these different activities that can happen, there's lots of components to each one of them. Nothing's really straightforward as I did one thing and I'm good. Everything is lots of things included. With 3E, pulled it forward, you see I've got this out, 5 decimal points. They are kind of, again, just reinforcing that they are not rounding, and it is just that precise calculation, where I've pulled in now readiness for this high school example. Graduation. So I really want to talk about this piece because this is where it is very different than what we've done in the past. So in the past, we've had GCI, we've had OGR, we've had the dropout indicator as part of the old system, and those kinds of things. They have gone with FGI solely. It is what the data was for last year. FGI has kind of always been happening in the background, but it really was just that federal look. This is 4-year FGI, and students receive the only students in 4-year FGI for graduation, which is 15 points of a high school's framework, is if they earn a standard or advanced diploma. Applied studies, GEDs, they are all considered non-high school completers in this system, just like a dropout is. I'm not saying it's equivalent to a dropout. We don't like that. We fought this tooth and nail as hard as we could from our sides in the schools and those kinds of things because they're saying, federal doesn't allow it, so they popped in that 6-year. So that's where that 6-year for 5 points is coming up with the applied studies, even though GED still doesn't count for that. So that's where you used to get points for all those things. An applied studies diploma, you get with GCI, you get the same, and OGR, they are considered graduates. That doesn't, you don't have that, it doesn't do that anymore. That kid is the same thing as the dropout, which is not true in practice. So this piece, we just have to kind of remember how that's looking. This is very different from prior year looks. And there's benefits to all of them. You know, GCI just doesn't even get calculated more. That doesn't exist, but OGR does and is posted publicly. So we still have that data to look at, but it's, you know, as of right, and I'm gonna say as of right now, things could shift as they update. So with this, we're pulling in now, so this school earned 12.5 points out of their 15 possible. Overall, the high school is 81.42 points, so they are an on-track school. Okay, so questions. So I have, before we go into the questions, because I do have questions, and I'm not sure if I answered the graduation piece for you, but I want to mention a few changes for the upcoming data years. So because it's one of those where this is how it was done for last year's data, so when we see that, we know what we're looking at, but then moving forward, we have to think about what we see differently. So the few changes are, next year, they are looking at including history in the mastery index. We don't know how points shift. They haven't given us any of that information. They've just said we are proposing history to be in the mastery index for elementary and middle, most likely not high school, but we're not positive. Additional performance levels to be added to EOC, so it'll go from 3 to 4. So again, another whole, even though, yes, it's the same stuff, it's still a shift, right? Like where we're looking. Growth will have to change their methodology because VDOE no longer has their contract with SAS who ran the value added data. One of the proposed methodologies is progress tables, which they are the progress tables that we had before. This is what we are advocating for because the target is transparent and students' growth is measured against themselves, not another set of students and how they do. We know going in, what does a student at a minimum need to do? We don't stop teaching there. We keep going, but it's one of those that, you know, it's, as a former special ed teacher, it's empowering for a student to say, I need to make it this far, and then what's my next step? What's my next step? What's my next step? Versus you're trying to make me get down the road and make this giant hop. So we're advocating for the progress tables to be the methodology selected. It sounds like they're going that way. The most impactful change that's already been unanimously voted in are the new cut scores for the SOL test. The new cut scores are significantly higher than the current cuts, which VDOE has stated the purpose of this is to raise expectations for Virginia students and to equal performance ratings of the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which we also call NAEP. So thinking about that, let me use some examples. This data is not embargoed. So the cut scores are approved and out there, and we are applying it to our old data. So for example, some of the changes are a third grade student in reading who earned a 408 SOL score last year. They were past proficient. Just like 400 has always been that line. Now, on that same test, with the new cut scores implemented, they are considered to be fail below basic, which is the lowest performance level of all the performance levels. Huge moves, right? Another example is Algebra 1 test in high school. It is the most used math test for verified credit for students for graduation. That test, so if a student earned a 400 previously, they passed, they got their verified credit, their math is done for verified credits towards graduation. Now, the cut score is 453 for being proficient. Some of the impacts of these changes, in every grade level, every test has a different change. A few of the impacts of the approved cut scores as we have calculated, because again, we just applied it to our old data from last year with annual pass rates, is that our reading pass rate overall would go from 62% to 20% pass rate on the reading. Math, we'd go from 57% pass to 24% pass. 74% of all students who graduated last year with a standard or advanced diploma, their diplomas would have been impacted. 74%, that means who passed with passing tests that now will not have passing tests in that area. that's a big impact. 60%, I want to say, I'm off the top of my head, but, so we looked at this even deeper. 60% of our gifted kids diplomas were impacted. So this wasn't just a low-performing issue. This is kind of a overarching large issue. It's huge. One student with a disability who earned a standard diploma, it would only be one that would earn it outright. Every other student with a disability who earned last year advanced or standard would be impacted. Those are huge. It's a huge impact. However, they have been voted in unanimously. There are listening sessions. There's one going on right now, and there's another one this evening for families. So hopefully if people are watching, they will check their emails or phones and hop on there, because hopefully, they are trying to listen. So they've made some shifts in implementation, not in the cut scores, but in implementation that is not voted on yet. So the scores are in with those cuts. However, what's not done is they're looking at doing an implementation of a phase-in over 4 to 5 years. So every year, what is considered passing for accountability purposes would shift till we get to year 4 or 5, and they say, okay, now we're at the final place with the cut scores. With that, they have an approaching index. What they don't know and haven't been able to say, and they said it would have to be a board vote, is that the approaching, which is not proficient, but they're kind of putting this little thing in the middle to say you can work through this pathway so we can kind of roll kids into this. They're not sure if that is going to work to give students a verified credit. So we still have those high school impacts if that is not the case. So with that piece, we wanted to make sure that that was clear and, what the impacts are for the changes and one that's already been voted on. So with that, any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
We can see it on slide 29. The math was 16.75, so it's conceivable to earn above.
Yes. Yep,
I
you
saw
got it.
that also on one of the elementary, and it just,
Yeah, because that 1.25, so a school who has more students in the past advanced performance range, they could surpass that. And especially because you have that, then you have kids who, even if they're failing, they're still getting points. And so, yeah, it'll throw them over.
Ms. Basine.
So since we're looking at that slide in particular, so if I heard you correctly, so the student population and the composition could change the point system as well, because if you had a school that had a significantly larger EL population, for instance, so what are the impacts in terms of staffing, or even distribution? Because right now we have, newcomer programs, we have, how do you envision those changes?
So we actually, when the new staffing requirements came out from VDOE last year, it's based off performance on access. So your ratios, so your highest need L students, the ratio might be, I'm off the head, it's like 25 to 1. But then when you have your identified who are the highest performing, it might be, 500 students to one teacher. So what we did purposefully this year is we looked at all of our scores for our students going into this year, and that's how we staffed our additional ESL teachers across the divisions, so that we're meeting the needs where the highest need students are by having more teachers in those buildings to help our students. And, I don't, Ms. McGarrett, I don't know if it would cloud the issue, but another thing to look at is there used to be an 11-semester rule for our ESL students in the reading SOL test, and that is now a 3-semester rule. So after 3 semesters, their scores count, where it used to be they had 11 semesters of, so if we have a student who comes to us, a non-native speaking student who doesn't know any English, within 3 semesters, they'll be required to take the reading SOL test, and that score counts towards us. where it used to be 11 semesters. So that's
And
another
it was
implication.
less than 11 semesters, and the reason it was that is because what the research shows is that that's the amount of time it takes a student to actually be able to acquire the language to proficiently navigate the English language academically in
Right,
school
right.
kind of thing. We sent research, we sent all those pieces, and they
Well,
came
that-
back to this.
Yeah, so that's what I was curious about, like, so that's what the research shows, so what research guided or informed their decision-making to go to 3 semesters?
They said the federal doesn't allow it, and they didn't want
Based
two
on-
systems. Based on what? I have no idea. They never could,
Articulate that.
other than here is we got lots of legislation
And we,
but with those kinds of questions.
Okay.
Norfolk Public Schools, meaning Ms. McGarity and I, were a part of the statewide accountability committee. So our voices were heard through this whole process, and we can be pretty loud at times. So we fought the good fight.
We're on the advisory committee where it's a small group, and they had Dr. Polden, they got me. I'm not sure they're happy about getting me, but we can, you know what I mean? But what's nice is that in the superintendent group as well as this group, Norfolk has a pretty big voice at the table for those things with Fairfax. So.
All right. You got Sherry on that, I think you got Sherry on that group too. Newport. Well, I've heard this presentation several times here and in my 9 to 5, and I can't even imagine what a parent.
I know. See what?
But going back to the graduation component. So I see where it looks like the goal is get students graduated in 4 years. Because beyond 4 years, I mean, there's no points, no added value to that. So with that said, do we have a plan, or working on a plan with our graduation coaches to tackle this big difference in?
I'm on Bruce, jump in too if.
We do, and remember, one of the requests for future presentations were on graduation
Yes.
coaches. So we have that on our agenda planning list. So we'll get more in depth on that, but there absolutely is a plan. But also just recall, we're also by law required to allow students with disabilities to stay longer.
Right.
So, in following that legal requirement, they cannot graduate in 4 years. So 15% of the high school score that's based on it. The 5% with the FGI allows, up to 6 years. But still, we're legally required
Right.
to allow those students to stay and to educate them.
And EL students can stay longer as well. They have 2 additional years beyond high school and yes.
So they're actually added into the numbers, but yet you don't get any points if they go beyond 4 years.
Automatic zero.
Automatic.
And it'll show up as the 6 year, if they do, but by then. But students with disabilities, I think they can go even 1 more year beyond 6. I'm not calculating wrong, but I think because there was a 6-year calculation that existed, that was the choice.
Now, for the parents out there, this does not impact the class of 2026. Yes?
In the sense of the cut scores?
Yes.
Okay, so the cut scores, the system for monitoring schools is applied to cohort 2026, this accountability system.
Okay.
The cut scores, as it stands right now, without an implementation plan, does not impact 2026. So a student is not all of a sudden going to have to earn the 453
Okay.
who is in cohort 2026. What's unknown is if they don't get out
Right.
that year and they kind of slide into that next year, like, does that shift? We don't have those answers. Those are questions we've put out there. We have also, again, from our 2 sides, advocated for this to not be implemented in high school until the incoming 9th graders next year. So then you have the set that's already, because a bunch of our kids have already taken things.
Right.
And there's a lot of when does the clock start for a kid or not, based on the assessments that they haven't been able to really flush out yet. But that's the big advocacy piece we've gone with for the high school part of it is incoming 9th graders next year, like when they changed graduation requirements years ago with the 2022 group.
Could I piggyback on something you meant? So why start at ninth grade, though? Because we know that we have some high school bearing courses in middle school. So it's like, you know,
Their 4 year starts at ninth grade.
Cohort.
well, I know, I get that piece, but especially knowing what we know with our data, well, it's, and I know we see it, districts see it across the board with ninth grade. I mean, we learned that transition year. Why not? I guess it's like
Why not
at some
ask
point
for-
you could, I guess you could make the case for
I mean, we
every-
said we would like more than 5 years. I mean, honestly, for an implementation plan, just because, you know, it's, parents are gonna have to wrap their head around, why does this look so different? Hold on, I had one kid who, a couple years ago, same score, it was this, and now this kid, and it's this, and you're telling me they need all, you know. Nobody's negating high expectations, but at the same time, it's, you know, we put it out there, they did not seem responsive.
Right, and we know that high expectations, high expectations are great, but we know that teacher quality, instructional quality is what drives success, right? And so we've got to also plan for having the infrastructure in place, staffing, all of that, building capacity. I mean, I'm building capacity among teachers, you know, to be able to teach also at that high level.
And I think, you know, as you'll hear in Ms. Webb's presentation with Advantus, also it's important that they fund everything that they're asking for
Correct.
at the state level. With raising expectations means that we need to have the basic foundations that are required to be funded. And you'll also see in the presentation, you know, the part about, you know, really looking for a reasonable timeline of implementation.
Can I make a comment? Ms. Basine, I'm thinking the reason why they're starting with ninth grade because the component growth for elementary combined schools and middle schools are just different from high school.
It is, and I think some of it is also that there's a piece in Virginia code which somewhat lends itself to this, so with the 2022 graduating cohort, so that was the first cohort that had the new graduating requirements. There's a piece in Virginia code that says if you're changing requirements for graduation, that it cannot start while they're in high school already. They have already entered the cohort. Policy at VDOE has said, we're not changing requirements, we're changing how you get to the requirement. Is it mincing words? It feels like there's a requirement change. So I think that's where if we, you know, yes, I would like it to start 10 years from now. But I think that's where we, you know, trying to have something to stand on to be able to say, this is why we're looking at that. That's when they enter the cohort for the first time at high school level.
I have another question. So off that, so if we could go back to the performance categories, and I think that is slide, yeah, it's one, or slide 7, actually. So if I heard you correctly, so a school could be on track, but be categorized as ATSI or TSI, right? And if I heard you correctly, you said they could be dropped.
Will be dropped to off track.
They will be dropped to off track. I guess I'm wondering, how are they designated on track though? So can you like tease that out a little bit?
So you're designated on track, so that 80 to 89 points. So when we were looking at the total points
Okay,
of the entire framework, Matt, as we were going through on that example,
right,
that 89, you know, the 79.8 something, that school is in 79 points, because we're not rounding,
right,
they would be off track.
okay, right.
So
that I
that's, okay, so
get. So,
what matters to be on track?
well, I just thought I heard that they were categorized as on track, and then
So-
something kicked.
Yeah,
something
so,
that
okay,
kicked
so
them
yeah,
into
so
off-
they are categorized by their points.
Right,
I am performing as a school on track. However, because of one situation or another in my student groups may be, I am identified TSI for this year, then they will take me, say, even though you're performing on track, we're moving you down to off track. So you're
Okay.
labeled off track, but your performance truly is up on that on track, but the state will have you posted as off track.
Why?
So
Yeah.
let me jump
Because
in on,
that's-
so my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. McGarity,
Mm-hmm.
but, so you notice now in the state's system, there's no longer subgroups. So the way they account for the subgroups is if you have one subgroup who is off federally, that's where you become CSI or ATSI, so then, or TSI. So then what they're saying is since that has caused that federal identification to kick in, your kind of your discipline for it is now, instead of being labeled on track, even though you scored 85 points, you are going to be labeled as off track. Now, I will say, there's also, I think, a kind of a back-ended benefit to it, because they are talking about, funding schools differently based off of these categories. So when you look at differentiated funding from the state, they have said if you're needs-intensive support, you're supposed to get more tutoring funding, more support funding, so that would help, and that's the reason why they're saying they're doing it. So we know performance-wise, then that's where we're saying we got to look, like we always do, at our subgroup data and say, okay, where was it, and how can we improve that so next year we're not in that category?
So this isn't going to mask looking, achievement gaps?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we'll still be focusing on achievement gaps. We'll still focus on everything else, because that's
Have
just
to.
the data work we do.
I mean, that's,
I mean,
we
that's-
have to. That's why I'm just making sure that we're,
Yes,
Not
everything that we've
in
done that are just the base, like the base data that I was kind of mentioning that we've given to schools, everything's by subgroups. Any data training we do, we look at that, let's talk about who, what's impacting you, who's impacted the most, what do we need to do different, those kinds of things.
but from a transparency standpoint, like right now, you used to be able to look at the subgroup data and see all of that very clearly. Like as a board member, as a community member, as a parent, you could see that. Will that still be?
On the school quality profiles.
Should still be on the pass rates, like it
Yeah, the
is on
pass
school
rates will be.
quality profiles,
Okay.
but it is not a part of this.
We'll get some points, you will not get a mini framework for every student group on the school quality profiles for accountability.
Okay.
But we've done so much back building on that
Yes.
within our data warehouse and the data that Ms. McGarity provides to our, all the way to the teacher level. That's not going away.
Yeah.
That's still the main focus for us.
All I can say is thank you, because like I said,
Yeah.
Okay, you good?
I do have one more quick question. So related to the GED, so I do want to get back to that. So what is the rationale? Because I
Of
know you
not including
advocated,
it?
yeah.
I hate to say this to you, they have said because federal doesn't accept it as a high school completing item.
Okay.
Again, it's do we love that? No. We pushing back, like, they are still, GED, applied studies, they are still high school completers in their way. So OGR will be out there, like I said, they're not counted as a negative, but they're not counted as a positive. They were for GCI, but that part's totally gone. So it's kind of,
Okay. And will that have any impacts on the programming that we do?
We've
Around
had
that.
discussions with our high school principals, and
Okay.
the right path for our student is the right path for our student. It doesn't
Okay.
come down to points.
Okay.
If we know there's a student
Good.
who
Okay.
needs a
I just
GED,
wanted to clarify
that's
that.
the direction that student will be going in. Now, we're going to do everything we can to get them a diploma and keep them on
Sure,
track.
right,
But the
right.
bottom line, and if they're going to walk out the door or get a GED, they're going to get a GED. We're going to make sure they have something that's respectable when they leave.
Right. Okay.
you.
Now we'll move on to discussion items, legislative priorities update with Ms. Webb.
Good evening, everybody. I guess it's officially evening. I'm delighted to be with you today to continue our discussion about preparing for the 2026 General Assembly. Obviously, last night was election night in Virginia, and so we do have a little bit more insight about, obviously, who is going to be leading the executive branch with Governor-elect Spanberger and Senator Ghazala Hashmi as Lieutenant Governor and Jay Jones as Attorney General. We also saw pretty major pickups by the House Democratic Caucus in the House of Delegates. If I'm being honest with you, it was a pretty unexpected night to see some of those sweeping election results that we saw here in Virginia. But we can tell from the way the voters' mindsets were that they're ready for some change here in Virginia. And overall, I think it's going to be incredibly positive for public education to see some of those leaders come into office and some of the changes that we anticipate. It is still very early. Actually, Governor-elect Spanberger just announced the leaders of her transition team this afternoon. There will be some additional kind of policy area-specific transition teams announced over the next week or two, so be on the lookout for that. And this morning, I was working on an election night report that you all will be getting, hopefully, to give you some more insights into kind of what we think last night's results mean. But to couple that, we are preparing for the 2026 General Assembly, and so I'm delighted to be before you this evening to talk about your legislative program as well as your priorities. Let's see, hopefully it'll work. So some of these slides we talked about when I was here in September, about why we have these two different documents this year and why they're going to help us tell the Norfolk Public Schools story. And so you do have two documents that are in board docs. I do have hard copies of both the priorities and the clean version of the legislative program if anybody wants those hard copies as well. But these documents are going to help us provide an overview of the division. I have worked with Dr. Pohl to update a lot of the strategic planning goals and make sure that all of that information is correct. And we want to use these documents to recognize the unique needs of Norfolk Public Schools and highlight the good work and progress that is happening here. We also want to clearly articulate the resources that you need to meet your strategic goals and to support your students and your community. So that is why we have these two different documents that are going to be helpful to you all as hopefully you come to advocate in Richmond, and also a guide for me as I'm there day in, day out to advocate on your behalf. So just a quick update on the timeline. As I mentioned, last night was Election Day, and next week we actually have a legislative event with the Norfolk delegation that I'm really excited you all are going to be doing. And so we want to make sure we get these documents ready and good to go so that we're able to share that with the delegation next week. And we are doing that legislative event in advance of pre-file. Well, right now I don't, in pre-file, for folks who may not remember, is the couple of weeks where legislators are able to work with legislative services to put in ideas for different bills. Just because a bill is submitted to pre-file doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. But often it allows a legislator to work with a constituent, a school division, an organization early to work on some of their ideas and work with legislative services to get that correct before the start of the session. And that deadline for pre-file does end on December 1st at 5 p.m. So if we do anticipate any legislation, right now I don't, but if we do, we want to make sure we try to meet that deadline of December 1st. So in addition, and I don't have this on here, that same week that you all are having your legislative, or the following week after you have your legislative event and when pre-file begins, the House and Senate Money Committee, so the House Appropriations Committee and the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, are going to have their retreats. The House, theirs is going to be in Prince William County. The Senate, which is where Delegate Luke Torian lives, who's the chairman of that committee, and the Senate is going to be having their retreat down at Radford University. And that will kind of be our first opportunity for them to preview what their priorities are. And certainly staff drives the presentations, but we'll be able to glean from some of their questions and discussions with staff on where they anticipate some of their priorities to begin at those retreats. And you all will get a full report following those as well. On December 17th is when Governor Youngkin will present his outgoing budget proposal. So this will be kind of his last chance to push his priorities forward. I do anticipate that there will be significant changes made by the General Assembly on whatever Governor Youngkin's final budget is. It's always been a little bit odd to me that the outgoing governor does the budget when a new governor comes in a month later, but that's Virginia for you sometimes. And the General Assembly session starts on January 14th. Budget amendments are due that Friday, and again, we want to make sure that if we do have any budget amendment requests that we're going to get in, that we do that well in advance and are working with the delegation to get that in. And then on the 17th of January is when the new statewide officials are going to be officially sworn into office. So switching gears to your legislative program, that's the kind of the lengthier document, which again, that's where I kind of will use as my guide as bills come up throughout session to give me guidance on, is this something that Norfolk wants to engage on? And certainly there are going to be lots of conversations along the way, but it's a good guide for me, and it's also a helpful tool for you all in your community to kind of understand what's important to the board. So since the last time we were together, we have made some additional technical updates to the program to improve consistency and clarity and flow. We have also, as I mentioned, removed or updated outdated language. I did work with Dr. Pohl to update the metrics and progress on your student outcome focused goals, he was very helpful in getting that information to me. In your board docs, you do have both a track changes version and a clean copy version. I will say in the clean copy version, anything that is a brand new language, so something you've not seen before, I did highlight that just so it's easy for you to be able to see. On page 5 of the clean copy version, I did add a draft statement related to shifting from the linear weighted average for the division salary calculations and the SOQ cost assumptions. That is part of JLARC's report and something that I think would be incredibly beneficial to Norfolk Public Schools, as well as added a draft statement related to assessment cut scores that Dr. Pohl and I worked on. As we're continuing to follow what the board is doing around the cut scores and an implementation plan, and really not knowing yet what that might look like, we felt like having a legislative position on that topic was going to be really helpful. So with that, I will pause just for a moment and see if you have any questions related specific to the legislative program before we move to then I will go ahead and shift to the legislative priorities document. And I know that there's a lot of text on this slide, but these are all of the priorities in one place just so you have them. And again, this document is really meant to be the one-pager. So the legislative program is, 10 pages. The priorities document is maybe going to be a front and back of a page that you all are going to be able to utilize when you come to Richmond, whether that's for VSBA's Day on the Hill, whether you come up to do your own Day on the Hill that we'll work together on. But this is what those priorities are going to look like. And so I do include at the very beginning kind of a brief overview of Norfolk Public Schools. I think that's important for legislators to understand, how many students you have, what your staff looks like, the types of different schools that you have, things like that. But as far as priorities, again, these are things that we have talked about before. First is to support legislation authorizing localities to do a 1% local sales tax for school construction. That is legislation that has been before the General Assembly the last several years. It's been pretty bipartisan legislation, but it was vetoed by the governor this past year. But Governor-elect Spanberger has indicated that if that bill were to make it to her desk, that she does intend to sign it. So I do think that there's a pretty good and I know, certainly it's going to be up, yes, yes. It's certainly going to be up to each locality, so this does not mandate that localities do it. It gives you all the permission to go take that to the voters to see if that's something they want to do. The second one is to implement JLARC's K-12 funding recommendations. This is coming out of that 2013 report that has really been well talked about, but something that the General Assembly has used pretty significantly over the last couple years to figure out where to prioritize any new funding. I will mention that even with last night's election results, we are still in a pretty tough budget year. I'm hearing estimates anywhere that there would be potentially $3 to $4 billion of surplus, and I say surplus in the sense that based on revenues, there may be that much extra money, but all the priorities, all of the federal, Medicaid and SNAP and all that are still things that the state is going to have to fund. So while that may sound like a lot of money, we don't anticipate that there's going to be a ton of wiggle room for legislators to be able to play with. But given that, we do think that these JLARC recommendations and continuing to push for them until we get to some kind of new funding formula is really where we need to spend a lot of our time. And the General Assembly overall has been very receptive over the last couple years to the needs of public schools, and we feel like we need to just keep hammering that point home. And so certainly there's a lot of recommendations in there, but I have chosen a couple that I think would be beneficial and positively impact Norfolk as far as budget allocation. So ending some of those recession-era practices. While there was an update to the support cap this past session, we really want it to be part of re-benchmarking ongoing. So they have updated it to the current ratio, but we'd love it to be part of that re-benchmarking number as we move forward, as well as the non-personal cost as well. And then also looking at calculating the salary and other SOQ formula cost assumptions using actual division averages versus that linear weighted average. We also have a bullet around modernizing assessments and accreditation, making sure that we are reducing our over-reliance on standardized testing and develop a more balanced, growth-focused assessment system. You may know that currently there is an RFP out for a consultant to come in and look at the state's assessment system. We do anticipate, because there have been kind of a continuation of Pearson's contract through the budget the last couple of years, and so we do anticipate that the state and the Spanberger administration will select a new testing vendor and put a new assessment system in place. What that looks like yet is still to be determined, but continuing to have a focus on that about what we want around assessments and accreditation, I think is going to be really important, and a topic that I think the legislature is very interested in hearing about as well. Also looking at advancing a new balanced accountability system. Certainly you all just had a presentation on that. And so continuing to prioritize school improvement, local flexibility, and really use those evidence-based models around English learners and student growth and locally adopted assessments is going to be important. And I will mention that there was an assessment bill this past session by Senator Van Valkenburg and Delegate Helmer that it has some delayed enactment clauses as well as reenactment clauses. You may have heard pieces of this bill talked about before around requiring the SOL test to count for 10% of the student's grade, making sure that SOL assessments are done the last 2 weeks of school. And there are certainly a lot of practical implementation concerns around that. Dr. Pohl and I have talked about it, and so we are continuing to work with Senator Van Valkenburg and Delegate Helmer on that bill to make sure we get some of those, not necessarily policy differences, but how are school divisions actually able to implement this when it comes to reality. So we are working on that, and so far he's been very receptive, and we're committed to continuing to work with him to make that a better bill. But certainly all that takes into account that we may have a new assessment system in a couple of years.
So even with the new accountability system framework that we just reviewed, and then what may be discussed in these retreats and may be introduced in the legislation, I mean, unfortunately, our students are always part of this political ping pong every time there's a change in administration. And the change in the accountability systems impact not only them, it impacts, it's also, it is one of many reasons why our workforce, teaching workforce is the way it is because they can never teach to,
Never have a break.
they can never have a break. They're always evolving along with whatever the new assessment, whatever the new rubric is, whatever it is, it's constantly shifting. And it's like, how do we protect that space so that it is protected from the ever-evolving, the political winds of, and just focusing on doing what is right academically for the student.
I couldn't agree with you more. I do think in talking with the governor-elect's team over the last couple of months to share some of the concerns that we've heard, they are aware of that. I think that they're going to put a team in place that is going to evaluate each piece of policy that's been put in or has been boards voted on it, or it's been a department-led policy, to really evaluate, is it based in data? Is it what's best for students?
Right.
And if it is, I think that there's going to be some commitment to keeping that, because they do know that the field needs to have a little bit of a break. But certainly there are things that probably do need to change. And I think that their team will just have to evaluate each piece of that. And hopefully we can get back to a little bit of normalcy. And again, using data. Making decisions based on the best interests of all students.
Right.
And I think that it'll be important for us to, be in the know about who they're looking at, for whether that's be a state superintendent, governor's administration. But I do think the Board of Education is going to be, and those appointments are going to be really important over the next couple of years. I'm a little biased. I worked for the Board of Education a number of years ago, but I think that board had a very data-driven, student-driven mindset. And certainly there are people on this board that do, but there have been some other, influences at play as well. And so, I do anticipate that they will try to get back to some of that. And again, hopefully provide a little bit of normalcy, and quiet things down a little bit for the field. I think people recognize that.
Am I correct that we currently have 3 board members at the state level who were appointed but never officially confirmed? Then we have 3 more board members that their terms up, 2 more that are up in
Yes.
July, right?
Yes.
So there could be huge shifts at the state level as well.
Yes, so just the way the appointment process works and the timeline, the Governor Youngkin did make 3 appointments to the board, and this is traditional. It's not like there's anything out of the norm, that then come to the next General Assembly for confirmation. So you do have those 3 that will need to be confirmed in this 26 session, and then July 1 of 26, Governor Spanberger will have 2 additional appointments, and this is a 9-member board. And so, a swing of a couple members here and there can drastically change things. That is what happened under Governor Youngkin, and why during his administration they were able to kind of get back the board so quickly with some of their appointments, because the General Assembly did not confirm 3 appointments that were made by Governor Northam, and then they too had those 2 initial appointments, and so that There will probably be some politics at play, something for us to kind of keep watch at. I have no idea what may happen. That is certainly up to the legislature to decide, because it's not just Board of Education appointments. It's appointments to a whole host of boards. And so they will have to decide how they want to handle that, how they evaluate each appointment, each individual, what their qualifications are. But certainly something for us to watch. All right, let's see. Next up on the list is supporting students through cut score changes. Again, something that Dr. Pohl and I worked on around gradual implementation of any cut scores. Again, this massive swing and change with the cut scores is going to be, pretty detrimental, I think, to our divisions. The board did have this as an item at their meeting last week, but they did not take action on it. I do anticipate that it will be on the November agenda as well, and so we will continue to kind of monitor what happens at the board level around this gradual implementation. But in the absence of knowing what that is going to look like, and the real possibility that the legislature may decide to step in on this topic, it's important for us to make sure that we understand where our priorities are and that this is something that the board supports. The next couple of items all kind of go towards that teacher recruitment and retention that you all have been very focused on, around funding competitive teacher salaries, around establishing a statewide teacher mentorship program, removing some of those VRS restrictions on return to work, and then looking at also strengthening the school bus driver pipeline, which I know is another concern. So those are the priorities that we have, laid out as items we have discussed. Also some that I think that are going to be very relevant as we go into this legislative session. Certainly, this is your document. You are free to make additional changes. I will mention you are free to move things around as well. Please don't feel like it's not necessarily in a specific order, but I did kind of prioritize things that I think that are a little bit, more likely or higher on your list to have first. But again, this is your document, and so would love to have your feedback on any additional changes that need to be made, any shifts, anything that you don't want on there or do want on there.
So is JLARC providing an update to the recommendations that they've made? Are there in their presentation to the Board of Education? At all? Okay.
No. And so JLARC is the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission that's of the General Assembly.
Right.
So that report came out in July of 2023. I will say that DOE staff, as well as the Department of Planning and Budget, work with Money Committee staff to kind of update what those numbers look like as they're going through the budget process. But there's no indication that JLARC is going to issue another report or anything like that. I mean, the General Assembly has been kind of ticking away at some of those recommendations. There are still, especially on the longer term side, some additional recommendations. For instance, a completely new student-based funding formula that I think are going to be around for a while, and that may be something that the General Assembly and a Spanberger administration do want to take up. Now, that's not something that I personally think could be done in 4 years. I think you probably need an 8 to 10-year runway from conception to full implementation and funding. I think it's going to take a while. That's what we've seen in other states who have shifted to that kind of funding formula. And so I don't know if that will be something that they want to move forward with. And also, honestly, the revenues and where that budget picture is going to be taking us, especially considering some of the federal impacts, I think will also be something they need to consider. And then I will just mention one more last thing. So following your approval and any additional edits, which I think it sounds like we're in pretty good shape, I will work with Dr. Pohl and the team here to make sure that we get this document ready for the legislative event next week, so that we have kind of a pretty document that we can pass out to the legislators and something that you all can utilize throughout the General Assembly session.
We're also working on some one-pagers for that, like we have in the past, too.
Yeah, and I do have some from other divisions that I'm happy to share as well. It's just a template so we can, a lot of those like fast fact sheets have been really helpful.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we can work on together as well.
Can I ask a question about the event? What time does it? 9:30?
School visits start at 9:30.
Oh, we're still doing school visits?
School visits first, then we meet at Sherwood Forest for Ms. Webb's presentation, and then a chat and chew.
Okay, I thought we weren't going to do school visits.
On your calendar.
All right. Moving on to agenda item 3.02, discussion and resolution for school board salaries. I'd like to, the resolution and also a document that I'd like us to take a look at with school board salaries of other districts, so that we can look at what other districts that meet similarly do. We had discussed shifting the salaries to 25 and 27, which is still the resolution. But if there was concern that that was too much, too quickly, I wanted to share what other divisions were doing in the area. So Hampton, looking at bringing their school board salary up. We are the lowest paid in the region at 3,000 and 5,000. So any discussion on modifying the resolution, keeping the resolution as stated? We will have a public hearing on this at the November 12th business meeting. So we needed to have a discussion before the
I am in support of a more phased-in approach, like for the salaries, over 5-year period to phase, 6-year period to phase. Can you do that, Jack?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
A little louder.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cloud. More of a phased-in approach, say if we vote, for example, 15 and 17,000, 15,000 for the board member, 17,000 for the chair, and the board decides 2 years later to increase, and I'm just more.
Yes, you can phase it in, but you have to follow the statutes, so, and you can only make the decision in a year before a general election, and then you do not get the
Right,
increase until the start of the calendar year after.
Yeah.
And basically, there's actually 2 votes that have to occur. You will, you vote now to tell the public you're going to increase your salaries, if that's what you're going to do. Then you will have to fund your salaries, which requires another vote when you vote on your recommended budget, which you will send to the council. In your case, it's a little bit different for council members, city councils, but in your case, for example, right now, you would vote on it, you have to vote if you're going to increase your salaries before the end of this year, if you want to increase them in 2027. Then in the spring of next year, calendar year 2026, you would vote again to fund the higher salaries. Then there would be an election in November of 2026, a general election, and then those members who are either newly elected or re-elected would receive the increased salary starting in the middle of the fiscal year 2027, because it starts on July 1st, 2026. So the middle, you would get it when you, either newly elected people start their terms to begin with, or you start your new terms after being reelected on January 1st. So whatever you do now, you can certainly, in future years, you or some other board, increase up to the maximums which are currently now, under the changes to the statute, the maximums for our board, which is based on population of the city, are the same as the maximums for the council, which is 51,000 for the mayor and 47,000 for ordinary council members. And so you all could, in future years, continue to increase your salaries up to that maximum unless the General Assembly changes the maximum. So you can, yes, phase it in however you want, with the idea that, though, you vote 1 year and you don't get it until after the next general election and in the middle of the next fiscal year.
So what I'm hearing, again, like I said, phase and approach, I'm thinking next 4 years we'll be recommending, approving based on the cycle that we have to follow. So, I'm not ready to vote for the,
Not voting.
I mean, just saying, for the resolution at $25,000. I think we need to phase it in.
So what number do you suggest, 15 and 17?
I'm looking at Newport News, which, again, of all the school divisions here, same size, term. So I'm looking at Newport News at 15 and 17, 15 for the board members and 17 for the board chair.
Did they vote to increase their salary in 2025?
That's been their salary for many years now.
Yeah, but they were set to vote on a stipend increase in September. Oh, that's Hampton.
No, I was going to say, they're not even, no.
I was looking at Hampton.
Oh, that was, no, that's Hampton.
Apologize.
Mhm.
Other thoughts?
I was just going to say, I'm not in favor of the phase-in approach. I think we just need to do this. This $3,000 was the appointed's salary, and we put practically full-time hours in for this job to get a $3,000 a year stipend. And I just think that if we phase it in, then it's just dragging it out. And I think it just opens the door for, we'll be spending a lot of time focusing on this salary piece, which will take center stage, where I think that academics and other things that are going on in this district need to take center stage. So that's why I'm in favor of setting a number that we can all agree on and moving on.
I think we spent a lot of time on this, talking about it previously. Phasing it in, changing our approach is not the best way to handle this, I think, because we're just sort of kicking it down the road, kicking the can again.
So do you have numbers that you're happy with, or the original?
I think this is most adequate for everybody.
What's the number?
The one that's in the resolution.
Okay, 25.
Because this is what we
yeah.
came up with.
Right.
Yes.
We was trying to match city council because they're going higher next year.
They're
So
going
that was the whole thing, to match what they're getting right now. And like Adele say, this is a full-time job. If you here for the reason why you here, you are putting in the work. And the gas money, the stipend, because that's exactly what it is. You know, we need an increase.
Looks like 3 people are leaning towards
Band-Aid
ripping
off.
the Band-Aid off and just going for it. Tanya, do you have any thoughts?
As I shared in March when we last talked about it, I am not in support of what is in the resolution at this time. I believe a phased-in approach is better, because, like Mr. Cloud said, we do have to fund it as well, so, but I am not in support of the amount that's in the resolution at this time.
I want to add, with closing our schools and consolidating them, we are going to save some money. I mean, I really don't think that, we should be able to reallocate funds that would help support a one-time increase in salary for everyone.
I would also remind the public that this is a volunteer job, but I spent more on my election for the position than I'll make this year, personally, and I'm sure that is true of other people sitting around this table. And we need to attract more people to this job, and part of that is compensating as fairly as possible. So I'm okay with ripping the Band-Aid off. Yes, our general consensus is to not change the resolution.
I'm in favor of the resolution.
I'll go with the will of the board. I just wanted to express.
Right, so there will be a public hearing on this during our business meeting next week, and it will come for a board vote at the business meeting in December.
Madam Chair, so a couple of comments. I don't necessarily think the increase, and this is what other districts have seen as well, that increasing the salary results in better qualified board members. I mean, the research does not show that. Some people, you also get people who do it for the money and do nothing on the school board, just as you do now. So, so there's that. So I would just want to be clear that what the research shows in the salaries,
Fine.
that's not.
Wasn't aware.
The other thing is that if I'm hearing, what's that?
Watch surrounding board meeting.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Go to conferences and we'll just see right there. The other thing is, if I heard correctly, so the public hearing would be next week on November 12th, with a vote expected to take place when?
During the business meeting in December.
In December, okay. And will there be a public comment period, just as we do with like policies and stuff, where even if they can't attend the public hearing, where they can provide public comment to what the resolution states currently?
I'm sure we can set that up.
I have a question. Ms. Basine mentioned research. What research was substantiating this?
Well, it's just
Your position.
research that I've looked at over the years. I mean, this has come up many times, at different points over the last, 10, 11 years that I've been sitting here. So it's just that's looked at. You can look it up and look for yourself. But I haven't.
You mentioned that you should be able to then at least give us a general direction.
There is nothing conclusive that states that raising board salaries results in, just as there's no conclusive evidence that elected school boards results in higher qualified candidates than appointed. But I'm personally not going to be supporting the resolution, and I put it out there right now, so.
I just don't want this to be a money issue, because I asked a question a month or two ago when something happened in June, where is the money coming from? So this can't be a money issue, because we seem to have money for that, and we all know what I'm talking about. That's a waste of money. Oh, you know what I'm talking about. the superintendent. That money that we're putting out
Oh,
for the interim, then for the new superintendent. Yes. So don't let this be an issue.
Good point.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're done discussing this for today, and hopefully, so I need a motion to enter into closed executive session.
I move that we enter into closed executive session.
We have future items on.
Oh,
the
you're
agenda.
so right. I apologize for missing this. Future agenda items. Potential future agenda items. You have one?
Self-evaluations. That was, there going to be a response to the Navy Station Commander's concerns? We brought this up, okay? What,
I've formulated a response to send to the email that was given on the letter. I'll send it out tomorrow.
I think we need to consider in going forward that when we have appointed members to the board, that there are some limitations what that person can participate in as far as voting. It will be a difficult conversation, I'm sure, but I believe that we should approach that here in the future as soon as possible, because we may run into that situations if nobody wants to be elected, we have to appoint somebody, or somebody quits. So, you know, I think there is a need for thinking about that.
Talking about limited privileges for an appointed member?
Right, such as they can't participate in the superintendent's search. They can't things like budgets, long-term issues that they could vote on. They
Well,
should.
I could argue that since you only have a year left on your term, maybe you shouldn't be voting. on
But
the
you have a
budget.
term, you're not appointed.
Appointed,
I was gonna
there are
say
legal
this-
issues there.
Legal issues
A member appointed to the school board temporarily by the board under the statutes for an elected position, they have all the authority, and the only conditions on their exercising authority are what is in the Virginia Code. They are essentially, for that limited period of time, no different than an other school board member. And the school board itself cannot put special limits on their authority. For that time, they're equal to having been elected. And in many cases, you just don't appoint anybody because you can hold the election, the special election, fairly quickly. In this case, it was postponed some because of the costs involved if you don't hold the special election as part of a broader election. The school board would have to pay for it. But I don't believe that there are any legal conditions. If you find yourselves in a situation where you are allowed under the law, and it's not always the case that you are, to temporarily appoint someone until a special election can be held, I don't believe you can limit their authority once they're appointed. During that limited period of time, they are full board members and have a right to participate and do everything as if they were elected to the position.
Maybe we should change this to discussion items instead of agenda items, because I think Mr. Cloud has answered the question. We don't have to bring it up again. If this is the law that we can't do this, then that answers the question. But we need to bring these kinds of things up so we know that we're thinking about these things, and some are good ideas and some are not.
Have any other agenda items?
Yes, there was one other here. No, that's all. Thank you.
I would like to discuss training.
Or
I think we
training?
definitely need more training. I know that, you know, what we had at VSBA was a nice starter, but I think we need some more technical training. And really, if we want to be a high-performing board, which I think is our goal, I think that we need to be able to all feel comfortable deciphering data, projection, moving forward. So I would like to get a highly qualified professional organization to come in and help us with that type of training.
And that was my agenda topic as well, is to do the governance coaching, to really do that where we're focused on students, student outcomes, and as part of that also includes board evaluations and all of the things that we've talked about and that we all agree are necessary parts of our work. So I think we need to prioritize that. And I think I've been
agree.
saying that for a long time.
Are we gonna add that to the budget? Because again, I think Ms. Thomas brought up a good point. We're spending money that we haven't allocated money for.
Wait,
And
this
and
is
if we're going to do
have
this.
I think we
in our
have
budget.
training, we already have training.
money.
And may I,
For terminating the superintendent, we have money in the
No,
budget for that?
it's a
No, we
typical
have a
line
budget.
item in our
We have a
budget.
budget.
Training. we
Everybody's
have-
talking,
we're trying
it's
to-
very hard to hear.
we have a line item in our school board budget for training. And I'll say this, we expect our students to achieve at a high level. We expect our building administrators to have professional development and serve at a high level. We expect our central office administrators to have PD and perform at a high level. And why do in the world will we want our school board, and superintendent governing body to not perform at a high level, to not have professional development, to serve in the best way they can? I'm just,
And to hold them accountable
and
when
hold
they're
them
not,
accountable.
when they're not performing at that high level.
So I'm going to hold the superintendent accountable. I'm going to hold central office administrators, building administrators, teachers, and students. But,
And ourselves.
yes,
Yeah.
so I'm in agreement with Dr. Martin, Ms. Basine. We need to get in training ASAP. High-performing school boards have professional development.
I don't know anybody that didn't recommend doing it. You seem to be focused that that's what I was saying. I did not.
I didn't say, I said, this is those are my comments. This is Tiffany Moore Buffalo's comments. My experience, high-performing school boards are in training.
We're going
That's
in
my
2 weeks.
experience as someone who serves a high-performing school board.
Oh, one more thing. Joint meeting date? Start with the city council.
Oh.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, I guess I'm bringing this up as a discussion point, or if, Dr. Pohl, your team has thought of how, now that we have the list of schools, what the report out process is going to be, what are, as far as next steps go, like when we're going to get some sort of update. I don't think we need, to be focused on what our students know and can do. That's what I want our board meetings to be focused on, but if there's some sort of an update that you can provide us, some means,
timeline?
with a timeline of when transition plans will be expected, what will be included in those transition plans, and so that and not only that, I don't want to forget this piece too, but, you gave us some news the day that we took the vote about, Wolpert's contract changing, and so I know there's some efforts being put out, what the status of that is in terms of identifying another consultant, all of that, some sort of an update on where we are would be.
Bring an update at one of the December meetings, just, as you see in the weekly update, I'm putting that we're meeting
Yeah.
constantly on it.
Yeah.
So we can update, more on that with the Woolpert, and the timeline at the school level and everything else.
Yeah, just as, Dr. Martin just shared, a timeline would be great.
I'd like a point of privilege. I think at this point, yesterday we had an election, and the person who was elected for Ward 3 is in the room, but nobody has recognized her. So, Ms. Slaughter, would you please stand? For everybody that doesn't know, this is Ms. Slaughter. She was elected last evening.
Congratulations.
Word 3.
Thank you.
Motion to enter into closed.
I move that we go into executive closed session.
I second that motion.
Ms. Moore Buffalo has brought forth the motion, and is there any discussion prior to the vote?
Move that the members of the school board of the city of Norfolk go into a closed meeting for the purposes which are set out in subsection A of section 2.2-3711 of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act as amended for discussion, consideration, or interviews of prospective candidates for employment, assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, salaries, disciplining, or resignation of specific public officers, appointees, or employees of the school board pursuant to subsection 2.2-3711A1 of the Act. The subject covered by this exemption is the discussion of unique questions for specific candidates for the position of superintendent who will be initially interviewed in closed meetings, which questions will be tied to individual candidates' unique qualifications and experiences, such that the questions cannot be discussed in an open meeting without revealing the identity of the individual candidates. Consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel pursuant to subsection 2.2-3711A8 of the Act. The subjects covered by the exemption are consultation with legal counsel concerning legal issues related to closed meetings under the Act and the matters set above in subsection A of this motion. Basine?
Aye.
Buffalo?
Aye.
Martin?
Aye.
Paulson?
I have a question before I vote. I have not seen the list of questions, so how can I certify that the questions meet the standards you just read?
That's what we're discussing, questions.
We're discussing questions that you're going to give to us, but how do we know ahead of time that they meet the standards for closed session?
If in the course of the closed meeting, you conclude that the meeting is being conducted illegally, you can leave, and when it comes time to certify, you would vote not to certify the session, and you would explain to the public, for the record, that you feel that the meeting was conducted illegally and state why, such as certain questions that were discussed you felt was outside the scope of the motion.
Thank you.
Paulson?
Aye.
Thomas? DeCalagero?
Aye. I'm calling a 15.